review now. Then we're going to continue talking about manner of articulation. If you remember, we said actually we do have three things that we can describe consonants by, right? You have voicing, place of articulation, manner of articulation. Now remember, when you talk about voicing, you say, for example, this sound is voiced or voices, depending on the vibration of the vocal folds. And we said the vocal folds are inside the larynx. When you talk about the place of articulation, you talk about where. Exactly, location, where. Is it, for example, palate? Is it the velum? Is it the alveolar ridge? When you talk about the manner of articulation, you talk about how. So place of articulation where, manner of articulation how. How I physically produce these sounds. See what I'm talking about? Okay, a quick review of manner of articulation. So this is a review of manner of articulation. We said manner of articulation describes how the tongue, lips, jaw. You know what the jaw is? This is the jaw. Jaw. Okay? And other speech organs are involved in making a sound. It means how I physically produce these sounds. Physically, what do I use? And how? What happens inside the vocal tract when I produce this sound? Now look at this. We said manner of articulation is referred to describe the production of consonants. So you cannot use the manner of articulation to describe vowels. We said manner of articulation is to describe consonants. Consonants are not vowels. Okay? Okay. But we're going to talk about vowels in details, actually. We have other terms that we use to describe vowels. For now, we're talking about consonants, and we said we have three things to describe consonants. And we're done with the first one. And the second one, the third one is manner of articulation. And last time we started talking about the differences between oral sounds and nasal sounds. Anyone can remind me, please? What is the difference between an oral sound and a nasal sound? You. No, this guy with the glasses on her van. Yes, can you answer, please? I'm talking to you. Her. This girl. I said girl. Are you a girl? Yes. What is the difference between oral sounds and nasal sounds?
The velum.
Velum, yes? What happens to the velum?
A soft part at the back of the mouth.
I did not say what is the velum. I said what is the function of the velum? What the velum does? What does it do? What does it do? What does it do? What's your name? Lama, yes, Lama.
It can be raised and lowered to make the sounds. When the velum raised and they stop the oral cavity, they make the nasal sounds. And when it's low,
Lowered, yeah?
Stop the oral
Exactly.
cavity and they make
Excellent.
the nasal.
Thank you, Lama. Thank you, Lama. Okay, before I talk about this, I need to go to this. Do you remember this?
Yes.
We spent like 3 classes talking about this diagram. Okay, so where is the velum? Oh, don't do this. Okay, can I use the pen now? I'm not sure. Does it work? No, it doesn't work. Okay. Okay, doesn't matter. I can actually, you can look up at what I'm going to do. Does that mean, no, you cannot touch that. Anyway, look at this. Where is the velum? Here. The velum is the same thing as the soft palate, right? So this is the velum or the soft palate. When I pronounce a nasal sound, the velum or the soft palate is raised. Why is it raised? To close the nasal cavity. This is when you produce an oral sound. Again, when we produce oral sounds, the soft palate or the velum is raised to close the nasal cavity. When the nasal cavity is closed, you have an oral sound. Now, when the soft palate or the velum is lowered, what happens to the nasal cavity? It's now open. It means you're going to produce a nasal sound. How can we tell? How can we test that? We said last time, for example, the sound ma, na, and ing, those 3 sounds are nasal sounds. How can I tell? We said you can use your finger and you can put it right under your nose. Say, Do you feel airflow coming out of your nose?
Yes.
What does that mean? It means your nasal cavity is open. Exactly. Now try to pronounce, for example,
No.
do you feel an airflow coming out of your nose? No. It means this is an oral sound, and it's not a nasal sound. So one more time, one more last time. When the nasal cavity is open, you produce a nasal sound. It means your velum is lowered because the nasal cavity is going to be open. Now, when you produce an oral sound, what happens to the nasal cavity? It's closed. And I think last time we did some animation. We're going to do this again just to remind you. So, the function of the velum is to open and close the nasal cavity. How many nasal sounds we have in English? 3. We have ma, na, and in. Yes, we talked about this. Yeah, here, this is also a review. It means, look at this. The velum is the soft part of the palate. You can say it's a soft palate. The velum can be raised and lowered. When it's raised, it means the nasal cavity is closed. When it's lowered, it means the nasal cavity is open. Okay, we talked about this. Let me just go to the website to show you again. Let's look at this again. This is really a nice website. Really good for phonetics, for learning phonetics. Okay, so you click it. What happens there? Some files can contain. Okay. Okay, let me try this. It opened this. Oh, sorry. Okay, look at this. Look at this for students who weren't here. Use the website to understand phonetics. So you press, for example, look at this mana. Mana, you press mana. You talk about mana of articulation, right? You press nasal and you choose any nasal sound you like. For example, the sound na, how do we describe it? As a voiced bilabial nasal. And when I describe it, I use the full description of that consonant. It means I talk about the voicing. I say it is voiced. Place of articulation is bilabial. Manner of articulation, it's nasal. So remember when I asked you in the exam to describe the following consonants, use the 3 things. Voicing, place of articulation, and manner of articulation. Look at it. Yeah, it says here also, it explains it. They say nasal refers to a consonant produced with complete closure in the oral cavity along with a lowered velum. If you have a lowered velum, it means nasal cavity is open. This is ma. So what happens? Actually, here you can press it to hear how they pronounce the sound ma. Yeah, just a minute. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. We have to look at the. Okay, let me check this. It's all on. It's all on. I don't know why. Anyway, we press that. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the sound is on or off. All I need you to do is to look at the diagram. Look what happens here. Look what happens here when you produce the sound ma. And look at the nasal cavity. Where is the nasal cavity? It's here. Yeah? Yeah, do you see where I put my mouse? It's here. Yeah? This is the nasal cavity and this is the velum. Yeah? The thing in green. Do you see? It's actually colored in green. This is the velum. When I produce the sound ma, look what happens to the velum. It's lowered. It means my nasal cavity is open. Look at now. Also now. What happens when I produce the sound now? Nasal cavity is open. What happens to the tongue? Look at the tongue.
Touching the alveolar ridge.
Exactly. The tip of the tongue is touching the alveolar ridge. Why? Because the sound na is an alveolar sound. So if you want to describe the sound na, use the full description of the consonant na. You would say it is number 1, voice. Number 2, alveolar. Number 3, nasal. Exactly. And nasal cavity again, open. And look, you have a vibration in the vocal folds. You see the vibration. And the sound in, remember, with these words, I actually did that last time, but it seems the sound is not working. I don't know what to do. This one? Yeah, I checked it. Okay, let me see. No, it's not working. It's not working. Really bad. Okay, we could actually use that. We could have actually used that. Anyway, how do you pronounce this word? It's rain. Singer. It's not actually singer. Singer. Yeah? Well, you have ing sound. Ing sound. So you do not, for example, just like we said, you're not studying English. Yeah? You're going to sing. Walking. running. Any word with the sound ing, it's not inga, it's ing. Yeah? Okay. We could have actually used that, but it seems that the sound is not working. Let's continue. Let's go back to our slides. So we talked about this. Okay, yes, we talked about that last time. Yes, this is the manner of articulation, and the first thing that we talked about is the differences, between oral sounds and nasal sounds. So we talked about oral sounds and we talked about nasal sound. Remember, in English we only have 3 nasal sounds. The rest of the sounds of English are what? Oral. What happens to the nasal cavity is closed when I produce oral sounds. Number 2, we talked about stops. Can anyone please remind me what happens when we produce stops? What happens? Why do we call them stops? Why do we call them stops? Yes, Taqi, why do we call them stops?
Because we stop the completed
The
airstream.
The airflow is stopped completely. So why do we call this group stops? Because the airflow is stopped completely. Look at this, look at this. Let's go back to that. Really interesting. You got to stop. Those are the stops of English. You have the sound pa, ba, ta, da, ka, and ga. We have 6 consonants that are stopped in English. Now the sound pa, the airflow is stopped completely by what?
By lips.
By the lips, exactly. Why? Because the sound pa is a bilabial sound. So what actually stops the airflow? The lips. Now the sound ba, the airflow is stopped completely by the lips as well. Why? Because the sound ba is bilabial. Look at this. We're actually using the 2 lips to produce this sound. Okay. Look at the sound ta, for example. It is a stop. The airflow is stopped completely by what? The tongue, when it's touching the alveolar ridge. Exactly. So when the tongue, imagine this is the alveolar ridge. This is the alveolar ridge. Imagine this is the tongue. So when the tongue actually touches the alveolar ridge, it stops the air completely for parts of seconds. Completely. And underline the word completely, because we're going to talk about this later. So it stops the air completely for seconds or parts of seconds. Then what happens? The closure, this closure is released. So the airflow gets out of the mouth. And you have like a very small explosion of air. Or we call that as a very small explosion of air. So when you try to pronounce, for example, the sound ha, you can feel that there's a big flow of air. An explosion of air is actually coming out of your mouth. That's why sometimes they refer to stops as plosives. 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 This thing is not working. What am I supposed to do? Okay. So we refer to that as plosive. Okay, you can write that Plosive, plosive, with a P, plosive, yeah? So sometimes we refer to stops as plosives. Why is that? Because when we actually pronounce any of these stops, you feel like there's a small explosion of air. So you say pa, ba, yeah? Ta, da, you can feel it. If you put your hand in front of your mouth, you can feel there's actually a explosion of air. That's why sometimes we refer to that as plosives. Okay? So we said with the sound ta, let's look at pa first, then we can continue. Look at pa. So what happens when I produce the sound pa? Look at this. Number 1, nasal cavity is closed. Look at this again. The nasal cavity is closed. It means the velum is raised to close the nasal cavity. And what happens? Do you see the lips? The lips are closed to stop the air completely. For parts of seconds, then the lips or the closure is released, so the airflow comes out of the mouth. And this is how we produce the sound pa. And remember, there's no vibration in the vocal folds. Okay? With the sound pa, it's the same thing, except for there's a vibration in the vocal folds. So the manner of articulation for pa and pa is the same, and they have the same place of articulation. The only difference is in voicing. Exactly. With the sound ta, what happens? Look at the sound ta. The tip of the tongue is touching the alveolar ridge. Nasal cavity is closed. Vocal folds, no vibration. Yeah? Can anyone explain to me the sound da? How do we produce the sound da? Anyone? Yes, Lam.
The tip of tongue touch the alveolar ridge.
Yes. Nasal cavity
Is closed.
is closed. Vocal folds.
There is
vibration.
There is vibration. Why? Because the sound da is voiced. Look at this. This is what happens. So when I say, for example, describe to me how you produce the sound ta. Describe how you produce the sound ta. You could get that in your exam. Describe how we produce the sound ba. Describe how we produce the sound ta. So if you want to describe the sound da, number one, you talk about the nasal cavity. You say, for example, the airflow comes out from the lungs. When it reaches the larynx or the vocal folds, they're going to vibrate because this sound is voiced. Then the airflow goes up. You have the velum is raised to close the nasal cavity because the sound da is an oral sound. Then what happens? The lips are closed. And it stops the air completely. For parts of seconds, then what happens? The closure is released. So the lips are closed for parts of seconds, then released. The airflow comes out of the mouth in small explosion of air. That's why you feel when if you put your hand in front of your mouth and you say, for example, ta, you can feel it. You can feel small explosion of air. It's like an explosion, but really small. That's why we say explosion. Yeah? Okay. Can anyone please describe to me the sound ka? How we produce the sound ka? We say the ka is a stop sound or a closed sound. Anyone? Yes, stop.
the blade of the tongue.
Not the blades, the back. Exactly.
Touching
The
the
velum.
velum, yes.
Exactly.
And
It stops the air completely. Yeah?
and this is a voice sound.
Voiceless sound. There's no vibration. The sound comes. What happens to the nasal cavity?
It's raised. It comes.
Nasal cavity is closed. This is a ka sound. It's an oral sound. Remember, if the nasal cavity is open, it's a nasal sound. Nasal cavity is closed, oral sound. Again, let's look at this. The sound ka. What happens? Look at this. I'm going to actually use the mouse to refer to this part. So number one, the air comes out from the lungs, down here. What happens to the vocal folds inside the larynx?
There's no vibration.
They don't vibrate. Yeah, why? Because the sound ka is a voiceless sound. It goes up a little bit, and what happens? You have the nasal cavity is closed. So the velum is raised, and it closes the nasal cavity. The back of the tongue is touching the velum, and it stops the air completely for parts of seconds. And the closure is released, and you have a small explosion of air coming out of your mouth. Is this clear? So look at the sound ka again. What happens? Nasal cavity closed, back of the tongue touching the velum. Do we have a vibration? Look, no vibration. It means this sound is a voiceless sound. So when you give the full description of the sound ka, you say it is a voiceless velar stop. Remember, you used to use 3 things to describe this consonant. Talk about the voicing, talk about the place of articulation, talk about the manner. 3 things. If you miss one of these things, you lose a mark actually for in the exam if you get a question just like that. Okay? When I say full description, 3 things. What about the sound ka? Can anyone describe to me how we produce the sound ka? Anyone? How do we produce the sound ka? Yes.
The nasal cavity is closed.
Good.
And the back of tongue is touching the velum.
Exactly.
And there is a vibration in vocal folds.
Exactly. Is this difficult? So the back of the tongue is touching the velum and it stops the air completely. Then the closure is released. You're going to hear the sound ka. Look at this. Yeah, sorry. Look what happens. Number 1, there's a vibration in the vocal folds. So this is a voice sound.
And the velum is raised.
Number 2, velum is raised. It means that's an oral sound. Nasal cavity is closed. It's a stop. Why is it a stop? Because the airflow is stopped completely for parts of seconds by the back of the tongue touching the velum. Is this clear? Why do we have these 6 stops in English? 6 stops. Okay, why do you think we have them in this order? Why do we have pa and ba together, ta and da together, and ka and ga together? Yes.
Because the place for articulation is almost similar.
It is the same.
It's the same. Also the same manner of articulation.
Same manner of articulation. They're only different in voicing. Exactly. If you look at this, you have the sound pa and pa. Both of them are stops because they stop the air completely using the lips. Both of them are bilabial using the lips. Ta and da are stops as well. Same manner of articulation. Now, place of articulation, alveolar ridge. Same. The only difference is this one is voiceless, this one is voiced, voiceless, voice, voiceless, voice. You see what we're talking about? Yeah. Is this clear about stops? This is a review. We talked about this. We talked about this in details last time. Any questions about this before I continue?
No.
Now let's continue. So we've said we're done with stops. So we talked about oral and nasal. We talked about stops. Today we're going to continue with fricatives. Huh? That's a new group. New group when you talk about the manner of articulation. Let's look at this. Fricatives? Yes. Do you remember this? This is the IBA. IPA. I stands for international, P stands for phonetic, A stands for alphabet or association. This is the real IBA. And we said, I remember last time when I told you we have to follow the symbols of the IBA. Stop, sha is a fricative. Look at ja, for example. It starts with a stop, da, and ends with the fricative, ja. So you can say affricates are actually stop plus affricative. You have here plosives. That's the word that I'm giving you. Okay? You can call them stops or plosives because you have a plosion of air when you pronounce stops. Okay, it says here they start with the closure. Closure, it means they start with a stop. Remember, a stop, we do have a closure. This is the word closure. Huh? Closure and hold phase of ta. So you start with the ta, then you continue with a fricative. And da with in ja. But instead of a rapid release, instead of that, instead of releasing the closure, what happens? The tongue moves to the position of a fricative. This is what happens. With plosion, the tongue moves to the position of the fricatives. Sha here and ja here. So basically, affricates are what? A combination of a stop plus a fricative. If you think about them, cha and ja, it looks like two sounds. It looks like two sounds. It's like you have ta and sha together, and it looks like you have da and ja together. That's all you need to know about affricates. Is this clear? Yeah? Okay. Combination of a stop plus affricates. That's why we call them affricates.
Just say two sounds.
Yes, you just have to say it's a combination of a stop and a fricative. Yeah, we only have two sounds, two affricate sounds in English. We don't have any other affricate sounds, two affricate sounds. Okay? And you have it here. You have it here on page 46. You can see them. Okay, in page 46, they're using different symbols for the affricates. Use the symbols that I've given you. Okay? Do not use the symbols you have in the textbook. Change that. Use the symbol. This symbol for cha and use this symbol for ja. In the exam, if you use the symbols that you have in the textbook, you lose marks, okay? I'm not going to look at these symbols. We're following the IBA. Use this. So cross the symbol that you have in your textbook and write this symbol. Cross the symbol for ja and write this symbol. Is this clear? Okay. They explain it here. They explain it here. They actually talk about the stop and also the fricative. Good so far? Okay, let's continue. So if we go back here, so far we talked about oral versus nasal, stops, fricatives, and affricates. Are you sure? No questions about these four groups?
No.
Let's continue. Can I continue talking about approximants? Okay. Let's go to approximants. Okay. Approximants, there are actually four approximant consonants in English. Four, just four. Number one, you have the lateral sound la. We call this sound lateral, and in a few minutes we're going to know why. Why is it called a lateral sound? So number one, the lateral sound la. Number two, the retroflex sound ra. Yeah, we're going to see why is it called retroflex. And then you have number 3, semivowels or glides. We call them semivowels or glides. You have the sound wa, and you have, this symbol is not the symbol for ya. Yeah, exactly. We're not going to use this symbol. This is the symbol. Yeah, this is the symbol for ya. Okay? According to the IBA. We call these symbols, we call these sounds, semivowels or glides. Remember, the word semi means half. Yeah? It's like they have a vowel. We're going to talk about this. Why do we call them semivowels or glides? Let's start with the lateral sound la. Let's think about the sound la. What happens when I pronounce the sound la? Say la. Tell me what happens inside your mouth. What happens? Tip of the tongue. One at a time, please. One, please. Anyone? Yes.
The tip of the tongue touches the alveolar ridge.
Yes.
The velum is raised and the nasal cavity is closed. No vibration in the vocal folds.
Actually, there is a vibration. The sound la is a voice sound, so there is a vibration in the vocal folds. Now, all I want you to do now, let's do this experiment together. Let's try to say for a while. Continue. Say loudly. Now, what happens? Are you stopping the air completely? No, the air is actually coming out. If you're trying to put your hand in front of your mouth, say, there is air coming out. So where does the air comes out? From where? The sides of the tongue. So what happens when I produce the sound la? Think about it again. Try to do it and you can actually understand what happens. Tip of the tongue. Yeah, tip of the tongue. I'm going to do this with my hand. This is the alveolar ridge. This is the tongue. When I produce the sound la, my tongue is going to touch the alveolar ridge completely. There's a complete contact. But the air is coming out. Where is it coming out from? Sides of the tongue. So what happens to the tongue? Imagine this is the tongue. It's going to do like this. The sides are lowered. So it's touching the alveolar ridge, but the sides of the tongue are lower. Lowered means like this. When they are lowered, they let the air out from the sides of the tongue. Because the airflow comes from the sides or flows on the sides of the tongues, we call this a lateral sound because you do have a lateral airflow. What does it mean, lateral airflow? It means airflow on the sides of the tongue and not from the center of the tongue. For example, when you say a word just like, or a sound just like to say, the airflow actually flows on the center of the tongue. It's a central airflow. With the sound la, we only have one lateral sound in English, which is the sound la. When I say a lateral sound, it means there's a lateral airflow. What does it mean, lateral airflow? It flows on the sides of the tongue. That's why you can hear it. For example, when you say da, can you continue saying da? It doesn't work because you stop the air completely. When you say you can do it. Why can you do it? Because the airflow comes out from the sides of the tongue. The tongue does like this. It lowers its sides. When it lowers its sides, it lets the air comes out. You see why we call this lateral? One more time. The sound la is a lateral sound. Why is it a lateral sound? Because you have a lateral airflow. How do I pronounce the sound la? The tip of the tongue is going to touch the alveolar ridge and the sides of the tongue are going to be lowered. Let's look at this. On the website, how do we pronounce the lateral sound la? Let's go to, it's actually, okay, it's not a liquid, yeah, you can call them liquids, just like if you go to the slides, I actually wrote that. Yeah, I wrote that. What is it? Yes. If you look at this, liquids and glides. Yeah. Liquids, so you can say, are the sound. If you go here, the sound. Yeah, I'm going to add that before, just a minute. Here, these two sounds, the la and the ra, they are liquids. Yeah, they actually use another, different phonetics books use different produce the sound la. Let's look at this. And you tell me what happens. You see what happens?
There is a vibration.
Yeah, it does something like this. It lowers. It lets the air flow on the sides, not on the center. That's why you can hear the sound. You can say l. You can prolong the pronunciation of the sound la. Okay, if you look at this, number one, there's a vibration in the vocal folds. It's a voice sound. Number two, nasal cavity is closed. It's not a nasal sound, it's an oral sound. What happens? The tip of the tongue touches the alveolar ridge. Sides of the tongues are lowered and you have a lateral airflow. Lateral airflow, it means air flows on the sides of the tongue, and that's why we call it lateral. Good so far? Okay. You have here an explanation. This is the explanation. The soft palate is raised. When I say the soft palate, the velum. Yeah? It means the nasal cavity is closed because that's an oral sound. The tip of the tongue is in light contact with the alveolar ridge, so there's a contact. We're not going to leave a small passage just like in fricatives. Okay? There's a contact. While the sides of the tongue are lowered, okay, you can actually underline this. Sides of the tongue are lowered, forming rather wide passages. The air escapes along the sides of the tongue. You see how we produce the sound now? Okay, there was a question in last year in the first exam, I think it was, why do we call the sound la lateral? I think the question was, why do we call the sound la lateral? What is the answer? Escapes through the sides of the tongue. That's it. That's why you call it lateral. Because you have a lateral airflow and the air escapes through the sides of the tongue. Because the sides of the tongue are lowered. Good? Let's continue to the second liquid, which is the retroflex sound. Okay, the sound ra is actually very controversial, or it has different pronunciations in different accents of English. Okay, in Arabic, let's talk about Arabic first. When you try to pronounce the ra, how can you say it? Say a ra. Say an Arabic ra. What are you doing? Describe to me.
The tongue is leaning back to the...
In Arabic. What happens when you produce the Arabic ra? What are you doing? The tongue is doing what? One at a time, please. What happens when you produce the Arabic ra? What do you feel? Ra. It's not a ra. That's a trill. That's a different thing. Trill, yeah? You say ra. What are you touching? Alveolar ridge. Exactly. You say ra. So the tip of your tongue is touching what? The alveolar ridge. This is the Arabic ra. In English, we have a different pronunciation. If you try to improve your pronunciation, when you pronounce English words with the sound ra in them, you cannot pronounce it the same as Arabic. Because in Arabic, what do I do when I pronounce ra? The tip of the tongue is going to touch the alveolar ridge. Ra, ra. Okay, it comes out with me as ra, but it's ra. Okay? Once. I'm touching the alveolar ridge once. When I produce the English ra in English, what happens? What happens? Exactly. Your tongue is curled backwards. So this is your tongue. What happens when you produce, for example, car? Your tongue is curled backwards. So this is your tongue trying to do this with your tongue. Look at my tongue when I say car. Curling backwards. So if you try to say, for example, card, just like you say it in Arabic, card. I saw a card. It looks, your pronunciation looks in a very Arabic way. That's why you have a problem in pronunciation. If we understand phonetics, we can improve our pronunciation. So next time you see a car, you say, I saw a car. Let's do it together. Say car. Not car. Or car. Car. Yes? So what are you doing? Your tongue curling backwards. Trying to curl your tongue backwards when you say the English ra. And that's why we call it the retroflex ra. Retro means back. Retro, back. Retroflex, it means your tongue is going to curl backwards in the area behind the alveolar ridge. Behind the alveolar ridge. This is the difference between the Arabic ra and the English one. That's why you do have some difficulties in pronunciation. That's why we hear our students saying, okay, I need a chair. It's not chair, chair. Try to curl your tongue backwards. I promise you, your pronunciation will improve greatly. Yeah? Say chair, car. Yeah? Writing, writing. Okay, remember, I'm not pronouncing the American one. I'm not pronouncing retroflex. Actually, I'm pronouncing another one. It's the British ra. What happens when I pronounce the British ra? It's actually no contact, exactly. In Arabic, for example, there's a contact with the tip of the tongue touching the alveolar ridge. The British one, we're leaving like a very small passage. You leave a very small passage between the tongue and the alveolar ridge. So you say ra, ra. American, R. Arabic, ra. You see the difference? Now go to Scotland, for example. Go to Scotland and you're going to hear ra. Trell, we call it. So you say, for example, this is very great. This is if you go to Scotland, you're going to hear people saying that. Go to England, you're going to say great. Now go to America, great, where you have your tongue is actually curling backwards. So you have different pronunciations of the sound ra in different accents of English, in different languages of the world. For Arabic speakers who want to learn English, all I need you to do is to curl your tongue backwards. We're going to teach you the retroflex one, since I'm sure most of you are actually interested in learning American English, right? So if you're interested in learning American English and to actually pronounce words in an American way, so what do you have to do? Your tongue, curl it backwards when you pronounce the ra. Car, chair. Tongue is curling backwards. Now, with Arabic we said that's why sometimes your pronunciation sounds very Arabic, because you use the Arabic ra and not the English ra. Okay? Okay. If you want to produce the sound, the English one, if you'd like to imitate the British R, what you have to do? Your tongue is going to be very close to the alveolar ridge, but not touching the alveolar ridge. If you want to imitate the Scottish R, if you go to Scotland, you say ra. Scottish people, they pronounce it as ra. Arabic speakers, ra. American speakers, R. British speakers, ra. You see the difference? Yeah? And we call that sound, again, retroflex. I'm talking about the American R. When I say retroflex, retro means back, tongue is curled backwards. We refer to these two sounds, la and ra, as liquids. Liquids. You have it in your textbook. We refer to these two sounds as liquids. Good so far? So next time, try to practice this at home. Look at the mirror and try to say R. Try to curl your tongue backwards when you pronounce the American R. Okay? It's up to you which R you want to learn. It's up to you. It's up to you which accent you want to actually imitate. Okay, because here they're actually saying, okay, I noticed that most of the students are interested in American accent. Because in this country, it's actually people are exposed to American English more than British English. So it's easier for them to learn American English and not British. So next time you try to pronounce a word where you have the sound R, try to curl your tongue backwards. I'm sure your pronunciation will improve. Okay? Okay. Now, last group of approximants, you have semivowels or glides. Semivowels or glides. Yeah? You have here the sound wa and the sound ya. Okay, why do we call them semivowels or glides? Let's look at this. I think I explained. Yeah, this is the approximant from. I explained it also in the glide. What does it say in my slide? Considerable differences can be found in the pronunciation of ra in different accents of English. And we talked about this. We talked about the American R, we talked about the British ra, and we talked about the Scottish ra. Okay. You have this also in your textbook. When you continue on reading, we're going to mention that. Right? Look at this. What happens when you produce the ra? The articulators approach each other but do not get sufficiently close to each other to produce a complete consonant. This is with the British one. Okay? What happens is that alveolar ridge tongue is very close to the alveolar ridge, leaving like a passage. Remember, the passage is wider than the passage you have in fricative. It's not the same, okay? In fricative, it's a very narrow, small passage. When you produce a British rough, you have a wider passage, wider. That's why you don't hear a fricative sound. Okay. The last ones are semivowels or glides. We do have the sound wa and we have the sound ya. I'm going to explain this very briefly since we don't have a lot of time left. So I'm going to explain this very quickly and we're going to continue talking about this next time. Okay? So sounds wa and ya are actually called semivowels or glides. We're going to talk about the fact, why do we call them glides or semivowels? Actually, there was a question also last year. It was, why do we call the sounds wa and ya semivowels? Or why do we call them glides? Let's continue. Because they are typically produced with the tongue moving or gliding. You know what glide means? Glide. Yeah? So it's produced with the tongue moving or gliding to or from the position of a nearby vowel. You have to understand the sounds wa and ya are greatly affected by the following vowel. So whatever vowel they have next to them, they're actually affected by this vowel. That's why you call them semivowels. So when I try to produce a sound wa, for example, in a word just like wet, when I say wet, the vowel e is going to affect the approximant wa. And the shape of the vocal tract is going to be, actually, is the same as of the following vowel. So if I answer this question, all you have to say is actually your tongue is moving or gliding from a nearby vowel. So if you have a word just like wet, your tongue is going to glide from the position of the sound wa to the position of a nearby vowel. It's going to glide, move. See what I'm talking about?
2 moves, you mean?
Sorry?
Gliding, you mean 2 moves?
Move, it's going to glide. Why do we call it a glide? In a very smooth movement. That's why you use the word glide.
You mean the tongue is moving smoothly from area to area?
Yes. So it's going to move from. Actually, it's going to move. It says here to or from. It depends if the vowel before or after the sound wa or ya. Okay. So what happens is that the tongue is going to move from the position. If you say, for example, the word wet, it's going to move from the position of the sound wa to the position of a nearby vowel. It's going to glide. Is this clear? Yeah? And the sound ya is the same thing as well. That's why we call them semivowels. They're gliding, they're moving from their position to the position of a nearby vowel, of the next vowel. You're going to see most of the time you're going to find the sound wa and ya at the beginning of English words. If you found them in writing at in the middle, or say at the end of English words, you're going to turn into diphthongs. We're going to see that. It's going to be diphthongs, something that has to do with vowels. For now, all I need you to know, they are semivowels or glides because they are affected by the following vowel. Okay, it says here, yes, it says here, the articulation of these sounds is strongly influenced or affected by the following vowel sound. It's gliding, moving from their position to the position of the following vowel. Is this clear? Yes. Do you have any questions about semivowels or glides? Okay. Please, please, please try to read what you have in your textbook. Really important to read. If you don't read, if you don't study, you're not going to keep up with us. You're going to have a lot of problems. Okay, that's enough for today. Let me just take a sentence.